Hey, War Pugs. So, this is PancreasNoWorks, and this is on Morathi. And the title of this is Dommy, Druchii, Mommy. I just don't. Like, there is so much wrong with the relationship between Malekith and Morathi. There's too much wrong in this relationship, okay? And I mean way too much. The level of therapy that will be needed for this family is just astronomical, okay? So, what it boils down to is, this Pornhub doesn't even go here, as far as their relationship goes. But we're gonna get into this. Pancreas is gonna give us more insight than we probably ever need and want into this particular elf and her fetish relationship with her kid. It's really screwed up, okay? It is 100% screwed up, and it isn't going to get any better over time. Warpugs, I apologize for the dementedness of what we're about to see, and I just hope you can forgive me. Guys, let's just get into it. PancreasNoWorks. All of his links going to be in the description down below. Once again, I thank him yet again for working on me with the Avatar of Cain video on the lore channel. Let's get into it. Let's go. Like and subscribe. And I apologize for what we're about to witness. The amount of therapy here is no.
You know what phrase indicates that you're a weak, feeble human being?
Oh.
I can fix her. That right there, that's the kind of attitude that shows you're a coward. Some Reddit tier le gentleman crap is what it is. You're really gonna go up to a dark elf lady and go, yeah, I can fix that.
No.
No, you aren't. You're not fixing anything today. And what we're not fixing today for this video is Morathi, the mother of the Druchii, mother of Malekith, evil sorceress older than almost everyone else in the setting, and tall, hot lady. Very tall, hot lady. She's been a Slanesh cultist, a faction leader, a goddess, and more. And overall, she's a pretty horrible person in pretty much every way you can imagine.
Yes.
And you know what the right attitude to take when discussing her is? It's not, I can fix her.
Right.
That is not why I'm here today. The attitude I'm bringing to the table now is simple. I'm going to talk about Morathi, her lore, her tabletop, and how she can make me worse. You hear me loud and clear out there, everyone? I'm not here to discuss why she's a horrible person. I'm here to get stepped on. Sit down, shut up, and listen to the worst lore video you're ever going to watch in your life, because I'm down bad, and I'm not getting better about it.
Oh, God, I didn't expect this. I didn't expect him to go on this. Well, let's go. Let's get to diving.
But before we start, though, imagine this. Let's say you are a dark elf after some invasion or other.
No!
You serve Morathi well, and now you've got some downtime to kill. Okay. You want to take some time to feel good after a successful raid. You know the perfect way to de-stress? Adam and Eve, the sponsor of today's video. Let's be upfront about what you're...
Really? 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 What the hell? My God. Oh, good God, why? Oh, no.
You're getting here. Adam and Eve make adult toys. All different kinds. Any sort of toy you can think of, Adam and Eve has. Looking through the catalog is like looking through an art gallery, except instead of boring paintings and sculptures, it's the finest adult toys known to mankind.
No.
They've got anything you can think of to spice up your life a bit. But maybe you're thinking you'd like to keep things on the down low a bit. Not to worry, Adam and Eve has discreet shipping just for you. They've got 24/7 customer service and a 90-day return policy, just to make sure all your goods are in order. They've been in business for over 50 years, so you can rest easy knowing they're making quality products only. And just to put the pop cherry on top, 20% of their profit goes to fighting the spread of HIV. That's a worthy cause if I've ever heard one.
There you
and just
go.
to spice up this already saucy offer, here's a deal from me to you. This video is sponsored by AdamandEve.com. Use code Pancreas for 50% off one item, plus free shipping in the US and Canada, plus free rush processing. Some exclusions apply. So what are you waiting for? Shop at Adam and Eve today and start feeling good.
Link will be in the description below.
Now then, let's continue being down horrible. Morathi long ago was once nothing particularly special among the elves. She's so goddamn old that she was alive when the elves were all one faction, and the Great Catastrophe hadn't occurred yet, meaning the elves' existence up to now had been chilling out on Ulthuan and nothing else. No demons, no millennia-long civil war, they weren't even aware of the dwarfs yet. She did, however, have two things to set her apart. She was beautiful beyond compare even back then, and since she was 11 years old, she kept receiving visions of worldwide doom and destruction. For whatever reason, she could foresee the Old One's gates at the poles erupting into chaos demons. No one believed her, though, despite the fact she did everything in her power to convince the elves of the coming danger. In her mind, it was because she thought the elves were so content and complacent in their paradise world the Old Ones were creating for them that they just couldn't comprehend things going so wrong. Personally, I think it's just because her only argument was to go look how hot I am to convince people that the world was ending. When your best defense against a counter-argument is to go look how great my tits are, you probably aren't winning the hearts and minds of the people. At least not in the way you want. Well,
probably not.
Turns out she was absolutely right, because those gates exploded and demons were everywhere.
Hooray!
Old Ones peace out, Lizardmen go into full panic mode and wage a world war to stop them, and the elves for their part also tried to fight with much less initial success. About the only fellas doing anything with any amount of success were Kaled or Dragon Tamer, a wizard so powerful he could give Teclis a run for his money, and Anarian. Anarian in particular is important, because he had just lost his wife and kids to chaos. His kids lived, as it turns out, but he didn't know that, and in his grief, he and Morathi comforted each other in the dark times of the Great Catastrophe, by which I of course mean absolutely ball-busting sex. She also brewed them sleeping potions because the Great Catastrophe was the sort of thing that gave everyone PTSD before the trauma was even finished, which is actually kinda heartwarming. All was not well for the couple, however, in case the fact that it only came about because Anarian was grieving over the perceived death of his family didn't clue you in. Morathi, for her part, did come to truly love Anarian. Anarian, however, was, shall we say, a bit more reserved on that front. He had a
Why would you want to remind me that that existed?
number of reservations about her, even disregarding that, chiefly among them being he felt she was looking into their chaotic enemies just a wee bit too closely. He acknowledged that she was hot as all hell, but unlike almost everyone else alive at this point, that's about all he cared to say on the matter. He wasn't hypnotized by her beauty, he just kinda acknowledged it. The same could be said for the temper she had. Anarian was the sort of guy who fought a dozen greater demons before it was noon, so Morathi's status as a sorceress who would occasionally fly into a blinding rage was at most slightly concerning as far as his safety went. That's part of what drew her towards him, since he was the only one who wouldn't leave the room as soon as possible when she started throwing a magical hissy fit. Despite everything she had going for her, though, there was a little issue of her being a bit too interested in dark magic, like I said, and Anarian's true love was his previous wife, Asteriel. Morathi was really just a shoulder for him to cry on, and you know how the rest of that saying goes, I'm sure. Towards the end, he realized that Morathi...
Actually, I don't, and I probably don't want to know.
It was ultimately an enemy of everything he knew and loved. He nearly struck her down when he left her for the final time, and it was a very nearly thing. The only true positive he felt came out of their relationship was their son Malekith, and whoo boy, isn't that a loaded sentence. What also didn't help matters was that Kalidor, Anarian's best buddy, also didn't trust Morathi in the slightest, and was very clear about his stance on the matter. As he was leaving for his final battle, Morathi told Anarian that she loved him, but he didn't reply. Do keep this moment in mind, because it's probably the last time Morathi is sympathetic in a way that isn't just pathetic. After he plopped the Sword of Cain back in its altar and cursed his bloodline forever, she looked all across Ulthuan for him, but on account of him being dead, never found Anarian. After that whole business with the world nearly ending was concluded, Morathi proved every single person who thought ill of her right by founding the cults of pleasure. She also tried to subtly guide her son Malekith towards the Phoenix Throne because she figured she might as well hedge her bets with being in charge of everyone. She gifted him nice things like a fancy boat and helped him along in his quests, and when Malekith was turned down in favor of Belshazzar becoming the Phoenix King, she was more upset about the matter than he was. She plotted all the while, and things came to a head when Malekith returned from his ventures across the world and was put in charge of dealing with the cults of pleasure. This ended up being a bit awkward when Malekith started purging the cults of pleasure, and one fateful day found out that his mother was the one in charge of them. Malekith debated killing Mommy Dearest then and there, but she promised him the full support of the pleasure cults and giving him the Phoenix Throne in exchange for her life. After a few days of fierce fighting and deliberation, he decided he'd side with her. Unfortunately, for all the cunning and brilliance those two have by modern Warhammer fantasy, it would appear all of that was gained over the course of the 1,000 years they've been alive and away from Ulthuan, because their initial plan to put Malekith on the Phoenix Throne was taken straight from the playbook of a 12-year-old playing Among Us. Malekith assembled the elven princes and loudly announced that Belshazzar was a traitor and member of the pleasure cults. And the evidence he and Morathi had for this brilliant scheme? "Trust me, bro, I'm Malekith." To the shock of no one but Malekith and Morathi, no one believed him. So they went for Plan B, which involved Malekith walking into the flame of Asuryan and killing all the princes. Malekith was deep-fried, a lot of the High Elf princes died, and Morathi dragged her crispy bacon son to relative safety. For a little.
And the thing about it is, they kind of, like... So the Flame of Asuryan, the kings were supposed to be able to walk through it with no problem. Apparently, something happened when Malekith did. Malekith was supposed to take the throne, but he didn't. I don't quite know. It's been a while since I looked at this lore, so you'll excuse me for being a little bit of a moron, but... Wow, this just gets so bad.
Little while, they waged war against the Loyalist elves, and when it looked like they were losing, she tried to undo the magical vortex. It worked, and then when that unleashed all the elves trapped inside of the vortex, it unworked. Morathi got a rogue blacksmith of all to make Malekith his discount Darth Vader armor, and then they fled to Naggaroth. Now, Morathi's activities between then and the 10,000 years later of modern Warhammer fantasy are varied, but also pretty much the same thing every time. The specifics change, but overall she fell into a pretty predictable pattern. Her and Malekith would plot against each other, it wouldn't work, they'd kind of make up, and then invade Ulthuan. Imagine that, but stretch it out over a 10,000 year period, and that's about what she got up to. One time she killed a love interest Malekith had because she was afraid she would make Malekith a nicer person all around, and he wasn't happy with that one in particular. She also dueled Teclis during the most brutal of the Dark Elf invasions at the Battle of Finneval Plain on Ulthuan, but despite her being a monstrous mage from prehistory, Teclis is Teclis, and therefore won by default. As we know from the novel Sons of Illyrian, at one point she talked to Kalidor again, and they had a nice pissing contest where Morathi called him a frail shadow of his former self. To be fair to her, he did look like a skeleton when they were talking, so I don't blame her for thinking that. She told him one of the reasons she wanted to destroy the world with the vortex was because Kalidor didn't want it destroyed, which is petty beyond mortal comprehension. This was then eventually followed by Kalidor revealing he's not actually a desiccated corpse of an elf, but still firmly in his prime, and Morathi was sent packing. Officially, she's one of the chief priestesses of Cain, presiding over his cult. She uses her status as the chief hag priestess to bathe in a cauldron of blood, which keeps her youthful appearance because of magical reasons that probably make sense if you're a dark elf.
There's a lot of things that don't make sense unless you're a dark elf. And I mean a lot of things. Same with the Druchii from Warhammer 40k, okay? There's a lot of things that you just don't... You don't want to know the real reason why they're happening.
Officially, at least in older lore, she's also back on the grind of being the head of the pleasure cults as well, which she reformed into the Dark Elves' land. Elves in fantasy aren't like the Eldar in 40k,
right.
There's nothing stopping them from worshipping Slaanesh aside from it being a bad idea in general. Sure, Slaanesh does still prefer elven souls above all others, but she doesn't instantly consume them like over in 40k.
Right.
She would frequently be seen surrounded by demonettes at parties, and those parties usually had a 100% mortality rate for people who weren't named Morathi. In newer lore, she was retconned to be an important figure in the worship of the elven goddess Atharti, their own goddess of pleasure. This is because GW started treating the elves like the Eldar and decided they're all horrified of Slaanesh in the exact same way. She's also a firm worshipper of the goddess Akarti, Atharti's sister and the goddess of dark magic. Okay. This is both because she's a sorceress and naturally wants to get that sweet god magic, and because the two divine sisters don't like each other and like to snipe each other's followers. It's equal part worship and hedging her bets. Another difference between the old lore and new lore is that whole business with Malekith. You know the business.
Yes.
The mother of all Oedipus complex's business. That was moved away from as time went on in fantasy. Whether or not you choose to believe the older or newer lore on exactly how close Morathi and her son were is up to you, but I choose to believe the newer lore because it makes it slightly less gross when I say that I want to drown between Morathi's legs. I have accepted that.
God.
I am not getting full monetization in the studio. As a general rule of thumb, Morathi is responsible for all aspects of Dark Elf culture that Malekith isn't, and she probably had a hand in those too. For instance, while Malekith instituted Cain as their chief god, Morathi is the leader of the cult of Cain and thus the one who handles the specifics. It makes it very fun when they decide they want the other dead, because one of them is the undisputed king and the other one is the one who people have to most often directly deal with. Usually it involves every assassin one sends after the other horribly dead, and a stern talking to from Malekith to Morathi that you better cut the crap. She does for a few dozen years, then tries to kill him again.
Yep.
Sometimes she gets exiled, and then she comes back. Repeat ad nauseum. Despite her maybe not Slaanesh worship, she has acted against the Chaos Worshippers to the north of the Dark Elves' territory. She seduced them to her side, fought them tooth and nail, and generally is as much a pain in their ass as she is for the High Elves. There was one instance where she built them a massive palace of their own and gifted them absurd amounts of wealth to convince them to pledge loyalty to her and Malekith. If you're mostly a 40k fan and think it sounds odd that Chaos followers would work with non-Chaos folk, remember that the Norskins as often as not just want to survive, and any source of glory is good enough for them. Serving the Dark Elves in battle will get Khorne as blood and skulls just as well as fighting for only Khorne, and Morathi knows damn well that's the case. Compared to Malekith, she's a lot sneakier with her schemes like this, willing to do more than bash people's brains in to get what she wants. That's not to say that Malekith can't be cunning, or Morathi can't use brute force when need be, they've just got their preferences for how to get things done. And the last thing before we move on to the end times is one final difference between older lore and newer lore. Much like her relationship with her son has changed, so has her general mentality. And I mean that very literally, because as Warhammer reached its 8th edition, she was given dementia. She occasionally thinks she's still in an Aryan's time and will look for her husband desperately, and it's just sad. And in the end times, it only gets worse. When Civil War comes to a head, and when Tyrion pulls the Sword of Cain, she goes fully insane and thinks he's an Aryan reborn. As Teclis is trying to bind the winds of magic to the incarnates, Morathi also is the one who really screws the pooch on that and messes up that ritual. She once again completely unbinds the vortex and dooms Ulthuan, and takes down a number of the mages trapped inside who were keeping it going. Good old Kalidor Dragon Tamer gets the last laugh though, because as Slaanesh begins to enter the material plane, he gives Morathi one final middle finger. As the ritual was coming to an abrupt end, Morathi tried to flee on account of not wanting to get Slaaneshed. Then Kalidor comes in with the people's elbow and drags Morathi into Slaanesh's maw with him. No, he didn't actually use a wrestling move, but come on, tell me the mental image doesn't make it better. And at least as far as I'm concerned, that's the most important bit of Morathi in the end times. She pushed Tyrion to be even crazier, and she got killed. In terms of what she actually did, not much. But in terms of the ramifications, I can comfortably say she ruined almost everything. Oh, she was also revealed to be the mortal incarnation of Hecate. You would think that would mean something, but much like almost every plot point in the end times, it doesn't. But we're not done with
Okay, so the end times, I have gone over, I have talked about these at length, about how they were garbage, and how I was really worried about them doing the same kind of thing to 40k, because they just screwed the pooch on it. Nothing made sense. Nothing worked. It was stupid.
The Dommy Druchii mommy yet, because she comes back in Age of Sigmar.
There you go.
Somehow Morathi returns in Olgu, the realm of shadow. For a while she was alone with nothing but beings of pure shadow she created with her magic, until eventually she found Malekith, who I will not refer to as Malarian because I simply do not care for the name change. Unlike her, Malekith was now a true god, as were Tyrion and Teclis. Rather understandably, this made her a bit upset. Not that she really deserves godhood, but I get the frustration. She did, however, have one thing going for her: the key to accessing Slaanesh to steal away the devoured elven souls in her stomach. She may not be a god, but she's still got some leverage, and more to the point, a reason for the other 3 elven deities not to just end her life. They split the souls amongst themselves to try and recreate the elves of old with, and naturally, Morathi dicked around with the ritual to ensure she got slightly more than the others did.
Of course.
Coupled with this was her getting quite the lucky break when she came into contact with Cain's heart, and she did not let that gift go to waste. She assembled together the Daughters of Cain faction, dedicated to restoring Cain to his former glory via worship of the dead god. Once again, however, she was being the sneakiest git in the mortal realms, because she was siphoning the power that would otherwise resurrect him into herself. That's not all she did, though, of course. She tried to seduce the other gods and get into their good graces, because hey, she's still hot as hell and it always worked before. Unfortunately for her, the only choices as far as gods go weren't great, so she never had much success. There's Tyrion and Teclis, who hate her, Malekith, who only hates her slightly less than he used to, Sigmar, who couldn't care less about Morathi if he tried, Alariel, who also hates her and would probably have her crucified on magical branches, the dwarf gods, who almost certainly also hate her for what she did to their kin in the old world, Gorkamorka, who you cannot seduce because he's the orc god and probably doesn't even understand sex, and last but not least, Nagash. She tried to seduce Nagash.
There's a joke here that I'm not gonna make.
Nagash, who is A, a skeleton, and B, taller than a Wraith Knight. Not only did this not work, because of course it didn't, Nagash backhanded her so goddamned hard that her true form as a monstrous half-snake creature was revealed. After this, she was forced to contend with the fact that in Age of Sigmar, she can no longer sleep her way to power and influence. For a while, she was being pretty low-key with everything, quietly siphoning power meant for Cain, but one day she decided she would act decisively. She dealt with the Idenith to get a lantern from them that would allow her to enter Slaanesh again, which incidentally, they stole from Teclis when they ran away from him. She entered Slaanesh not just to get more souls, but specifically specifically to steal the power of the previous Phoenix King Slaanesh had inside of her. Each of them had a bit of Assyrian's power within them, which coincidentally also means that Malekith being the one true Phoenix King has been retconned. Thank God. When she reached the last and first one, Anarion, she paused. Even after countless eons and the end of the world, she still held some small bit of love for him. But do you remember how he didn't say he loved her back at the end?
Right.
Absence did not make his heart grow fonder, and he cut her soul in two. Because of this, Morathi's attempt at godhood both did and didn't work. On the plus side, she was now a full goddess. Good for her.
Yay.
On the downside, there's a whole lot of crap she has to deal with now because of it. The first thing she did upon reaching godhood was annexing the city of Anvilgard from under Sigmar's nose. She had the excuse of the fact it was going to be crushed by orcs and a rampaging destruction god without her intervention, but this coupled with the fact she's now a full god means Sigmar and the rest are going to be watching her like a hawk. And now instead of being able to choose between looking like the hottest elf ever or the hottest snake monster ever, she's now one being with two bodies. The elf version is Morathi Kane, and the snake lady is now the Shadow Queen. The Shadow Queen seems to have gotten a bit more of Kane's influence than she would have liked. The god Kragnos whooped her ass during the whole Anvilgard business, and she's on the warpath to rematch him, in spite of the fact she'll probably still get bodied, and Morathi is having issues reining her in. It's looking more and more likely that the Shadow Queen half of Morathi is going to be causing some diplomatic issues in the future. Despite now becoming a proper god, Sigmar still deems her beneath his notice, which pisses her off to no end. Instead of dealing with her himself, he sent the Celestin Prime to do it. She wasn't happy with the implication of still not being worth his time, but they disappeared into a room for a while, and when they came out, Morathi was allowed to have Anvilgard in exchange for all the Stormcast within the city. She renamed the city Har Kuran and is contending with the fact that everyone inside of it would rather her not be in charge. Interestingly enough, the dwarf god Grungni of all people told the Celestin Prime to just let her have the damn city. Like I said before, never would have thought he cared for her in the slightest. Maybe she should have tried her luck getting into his pants.
Maybe.
The problems don't end there either. Her daughters of Cain are having a bit of a religious schism at the moment, with many of them being appalled and angry over the fact Morathi lied about their whole religion. Or rather, the fact that she lied about using the power she was stealing to resurrect Cain. The divide between those loyal to her and those who aren't is becoming more and more divisive as time goes on. She also had a nice little chat with Malekith, who criticized her for blundering into godhood in a way that managed to piss off pretty much every faction in the setting. She told him he couldn't talk down to her and cut off his fingers, but he's made of shadow, so it didn't really do much to him. When she told him about Tyrion moving against him, Malekith informed her he was well aware and was taking steps to counter the god of Hysh, which impressed her a bit and made her regard her son just a little bit more fondly. Not much, but hey, they aren't trying to kill each other anymore and they're sort of working together, so it's an improvement from fantasy.
Give it 5 minutes, it'll change.
Leaves the conversation by going to crush a revolt against her in Anvilgard and basking in the glory of her newfound divinity. Oh, when Nagash attacked her with Night Haunt because he thinks the soul she used to ascend to godhood belonged to him. But that's a non-statement. That's his standard operating procedure. Me telling you Nagash is complaining about people not handing their souls to him is the same as me telling you water is wet. I'm assuming you knew that already.
Yeah.
Now, looking back on the script, I'm worried I might have taken the piss out of Morathi just a bit too much. And to be fair, she failed to successfully put Malekith on the throne of Ulthuan, failed to retake Ulthuan over the course of 10,000 years, wasn't even a god like almost every other returning elf character in AOS, and when she did finally become a god, it was in possibly the most offensive way she could have done it. So let's just clear the water on this. Morathi is monstrously competent and monstrously dangerous. She is one of the strongest mages in all of Warhammer, only really being beaten out by the Slann, Teclis, and Nagash. Her being basically immortal in fantasy, and now actually immortal in AOS, means that she can spend centuries plotting for a single thing, and almost no one will see it coming until they have to deal with the aftermath of it. She consorts with chaos and has always gotten away with it, and quite frankly, that's probably the ultimate testament to how capable and frightening she can be. Slaanesh demons, especially out of every demon out there, will do their best to make sure you regret dealing with them, and Morathi has never had to face those consequences. Unless your name is Aletha Nar, you would do well to be deathly afraid of what this woman can do, because she can either have a network of spies spanning the entire world blackbag you, or send your very soul to the depths of hell herself. To reinforce this, let's look at how monstrous this elf can be in Age of Sigmar. For lore positives of Morathi, she's a cunning sorceress who's held her ground for 10,000 years in Warhammer Fantasy and managed to survive being eaten by Slaanesh.
That is not something that's lightly taken. That is not something... Surviving that long in fantasy, especially considering the things she's done, she's one of a kind.
She's crawled her way to godhood inch by agonizing inch and hasn't let anything stand in her way. If you want a character that not only has the strength of will to face the most daunting of challenges, but the cunning and power to do so in a variety of ways, you want her.
Yes.
She's of course also a pick for you if you want a faction leader to be in your army. She founded and leads the Daughters of Cain, and more to the point, she's a goddess now, which is another thing going for her from a lore standpoint. It leads into a couple positives actually. She's shown growth in ways beyond just character growth. Seeing a character grow and change is always nice, but failing that, seeing them grow physically can be just as cool, and there's no upgrade quite like reaching divinity. If you like returning characters from Warhammer Fantasy, she's of course an ideal pick, with the added bonus that her army is largely also made up of returning Warhammer Fantasy models. Or at the least, it's inspired by the Witch Elves from Fantasy for the newer models it has. And finally, for lore positives, attractive dark elf lady who will crush your testicles. I told you I was here for her to make me worse, didn't I? And let me just counter a few of the arguments I could see coming to that statement. She's a monster, ad hominem. She's a dark elf, they're inherently evil. Hasty generalization. She'll just torture you to death. You don't know what I'm into. As for tabletop positives, she's good at everything. Because remember, she's both a snake monster and a sexy lady. Her elf form, Morathi Cain, is quite the spellcaster. She can cast 3 spells a turn and unbind 2, and automatically knows the lore of Shadow. She also has the spell Black Horror of Olgu, which is a nice way to get some easy mortal wounds. With a 4-up save and 6 wounds, she's not exactly the tankiest around, but we'll get to why that isn't so bad shortly. She can have any Daughters of Cain unit fight for free. She's treated as a general even if she's not your general, and all units trying to hit her automatically subtract 1 from their roll because of how hot she is. But you don't just get Morathi the Mage out of taking her. You also get Morathi the Shadow Queen out of the deal. It used to be that you could choose to have her transform, or depending on how many wounds she's taken, she'd lose control and do it. But now you take both of her forms at once, since her ascendancy to godhood split her soul in half. Whereas Morathi Cain fights by casting spells, the Shadow Queen's role on the battlefield is to fuck your opponent in the mouth. At twice the number of wounds, she's much tankier, but the most standout rules in this department are the 2 bodies, 1 soul, and Iron Heart of Cain rules. Any wounds Morathi takes are instead allocated to the Shadow Queen, and the Shadow Queen cannot take more than 3 wounds per turn. If an ability would kill either of them outright, the Shadow Queen just takes an automatic 3 wounds and that's it. While the Shadow Queen can't heal, she arguably doesn't need it. Throw her into the middle of the enemy's army. It's probably not gonna matter until turn 4 at the least. This pairs nicely with how absurdly powerful the Shadow Queen is in melee. Morathi in melee is okay, but nothing to write home about. The Shadow Queen can dish out dozens of wounds a turn, and she lets some of the Daughters of Cain more monstrous units fight better with a +1 to their attack stat. To top it off, she can fly, and until her stat line starts degrading, has 14 inches
Flying snake
of movement. There is nowhere safe from her. Use her to take out archers and artillery, throw her at a fragile mage casting spells, or just walk her into something 3 times her size and have her send it straight to hell. There are very few things on the tabletop that have a chance at stopping her, and even some of those aren't safe. If she gets into range of Archaon or Nagash, there's no telling who'll win. Even Gotrek isn't safe, although that's tabletop only, I'm sure. In universe, Morathi would graduate from goddess to dead goddess if they fought each other. But while they come as a kid and share a wound pool, they're separate units in the game, meaning you can have Morathi Cain on one end of the battlefield throwing spells around while the Shadow Queen mulches the other end. They're versatile in a way that no one else quite manages because of this, letting you pull off all kinds of tricks to get the upper hand. Very fitting for Morathi's character. And either way, her models are gorgeous. All half jokes about how attractive she is aside, Morathi Cain is the epitome of an evil sorceress as far as modeling goes, and the Shadow Queen is beautiful in the way only the most monstrous of models can be. As for her flaws though, she's got a few. Lore-wise, she's kind of been playing second fiddle in some way all her life. She was second fiddle to Anarion and Kalador, second fiddle to Malekith, second fiddle to Malekith, Tyrion, and Teclis as gods in AOS. She by no means accepts this as her place in life and constantly strives for more, but you'll notice she has a lot of stumbling blocks in her way. Kind of makes her an underdog, which is appealing in its own way, but just keep everything in mind. She's also evil. Just straight up a horrible person. Yes. As I said before, I have no issues with this, but I'm a simp for anyone with 2 X chromosomes and pointy ears. Myrrh notwithstanding. She's directly killed at least thousands, and indirectly gotten millions killed, and between her and Malekith, arguably they put the world in a state that the end times could have happened in the first place. In Age of Sigmar, she's only on the side of order because she wants to build up her own twisted civilization. No one on her side likes her, it's just that her choices outside of that are Chaos, the Orcs, and the Skeleman who pimp-slapped her so hard her magic turned off. Morathi is probably the last person you want in your army if you want to be under any illusion you're fighting for a higher purpose, because even her lies to the rest of the Daughters of Cain involve bringing back the god of murder. For all her cunning, she also seems to be completely unaware of the consequences of her own actions. take her desperate bid to achieve godhood. The idea that the other gods are now going to be extra pissed at her for the action she took to get it just doesn't seem to factor into her equations.
Why would
she
it?
kind of just tells Malekith she can handle it now that she's a proper god, ignoring the fact that Sigmar and Nagash together took on beasts that would have made the Chaos Gods wary, and none of the other gods are slouches either. Between this and when she stole extra souls from Slaanesh early in the setting's history, she's also at least twice now contributed to Slaanesh's prison being weakened and her getting closer to breaking out. This is not only stupid, but ironic because early on she was worried Slaanesh would be able to break out one day. So she complained about Slaanesh getting free and then proceeded to make it so Slaanesh would have an easier time getting free. I'm adding 2 and 2 here and it's coming up 5. I do not understand her line of reasoning. And with
Don't try to understand that. I don't want to understand that. I simply don't.
the Shadow Queen seeming to be doing its own thing, Morathi is more and more worried of completely losing control over it. It's almost certainly going to kill something it shouldn't have, and then Morathi's going to have to contend with the fact that no one outside her faction likes her, and half of her own faction doesn't either. That's what you get when you steal divinity from the god of murder. As for tabletop cons, the worst is easily her point cost. Since you now take both of them at once, you're paying for both of them at once, and that comes out to a whopping 700 points. Woo. Not as bad as Nagash, but you don't get credit for not being half of a 2,000 point army. Both of the models are great at what they do, but they're a massive chunk of their force. You know the drill when I talk about expensive characters by now. Smaller games, she just isn't making an appearance. Larger games, she's the cornerstone of your army. Only being able to take 3 wounds a turn does largely offset this, but you'll probably still either end up forming your battle plan around her, or at least have her be a key component of it. Again, not nearly as bad as other characters since she has some serious staying power. In this case, it's more making sure you use her right. Having the Shadow Queen chase cavalry around all game while the rest of your army gets butchered isn't gonna feel good, so make sure you don't do that. And of course, when one goes, so does the other. Suddenly losing a potent spellcaster and a melee beatstick at the wrong time could cost the game, and while she'll probably have wiped out something important by that point, it's the sort of thing that might take you as a player some getting used to. I feel safe in
700 points on a battlefield is substantial. Like, massively substantial. Losing that in one hit?
the assumption that most people will expect only one model to be destroyed when you kill one model, not 2 of them, so it's just something to consider. It's pretty clearly stated in the rules, so it's not like GW is hiding it, you just have to get used to the fact that 2 models have the same pool of HP. Honestly though, that's about all I can say is bad for her tabletop stuff. Yeah, a degrading stat line makes her weaker over time, but her elven form doesn't have one, and she's still disgustingly powerful even as she drops down. I can't even say you need to worry about the enemy focusing everything on her or her weaker elven form, because if they do, they're going to hit that wall of not being able to cause any more wounds that turn. And to be clear, it's an entire turn this lasts for, not just a single phase. This is the shortest rules con phase I've ever done, because there just isn't much bad to say about her. The best bet you have for dealing with her quickly is managing to inflict wounds on her during both of the player's turns, since those are technically separate turns, but even then, that's 2 turns for her to smash your army to pieces with impunity. I mean, for God's sake, the biggest complaint I have is that I don't understand why Morathi Kane even has her own hit point stat. I feel like I'm missing something that'll either let you snipe Morathi or give them a technical total of 18 wounds, but I can't figure out what. If I'm missing something glaringly obvious, please let me know. She's also, of course, in Warhammer Total War. For the short and sweet of that, you can recruit a small number of DMATs to her faction, and she causes Slaanesh corruption, showing that CA is going for the older approach to her lore. Her voice in the game's the sort of thing to make an appearance in the dreams you don't tell people about. Her model is one slightly adjusted piece of armor away from demonetization, and she's a powerful casting lord that can unlock a flying mount with everything around her starting area she needs to have a solid first 20 turns. The downside of this is that all her neighbors hate her, with the starting pact with Mazdamundi almost certainly not going to last much longer than that, while Ulthuan is about 5 feet to her right. The Asur do not like Morathi, and Tyrion is sooner or later going to launch a crusade to rip you to pieces, while the Lizardmen do the same from the south, and Kislev of all factions does it from the north. If you're going to play Morathi in Total War, understand you are playing Dark Elf Techless. And with that, we have Morathi. Sorceress Supreme, Evil Woman, Warhammer's most attractive female character, and second most attractive character overall. I'm sure you can figure out who I put in first. Thank you as always to my wonderful channel members. I can't think of a single comparison joke for this video because everything I come up with is completely awful. So how about I just say thank you for the support. If you'd like to support the channel, feel free.
Alright, let's see.
Alright, end of the video. Almost everyone is gone by this point, and everyone left is probably going to keep watching my stuff no matter what I do. I would just like to take this moment to say I don't blame Malekith in the slightest, and in his shoes, I would too. I mean, come on, do you see her in Total War? She's just walking around a winter wasteland with those grippers hanging out. I cannot help being this down bad, man. There's 4.
Oh no. There was a lot I didn't need to hear in there. There was a lot I didn't need to hear in there. My mental health is destroyed. My mental health is just absolutely floored at this point. Warpugs, can someone please tell me why? Why? Why this is why we can't have nice things. Oh. So, in the early lore, if you just have no clue and did not infer from what he said, Malekith and his mother were in a very, very not okay relationship by any standard. The whole Oedipus comment, yeah, it was fairly accurate. Warpugs, I don't need to go into why you want to avoid things like this, but yeah, it was a thing. It was a thing. And Pank, you were down bad in a way. Come on, man. Help me out here. Help me help you. And of course, this was sponsored by Adam and Eve, which somehow makes this worse. And I didn't think that was going to be possible, but it somehow made it worse. Warpugs, all of PancreasNoWork's links are going to be in the description down below, including his sponsorship for Adam and Eve when he's talking about his Dommy mommy Druchii. Druchii, not Druchii. I don't know how to wrap that up. I don't. Oh, God. I just realized what I said. You know what? Bye. Warpugs, I'm out. I'm out. He's down bad. It's